What is going on, everyone? It's your guy Cole Jackson back here on Road Graders, brought to you today on the Russell Street Report, courtesy of our friends at Jimmy's Seafood. We are going to be diving into our last final 53-man roster prediction. We're about 48 hours away from the final roster being announced, putting all of these discussions to ease. We got a little information today from the press conference after the preseason game. I'm obviously recording this Saturday night, so it was today, tomorrow, or yesterday for those watching live. But I thought there were some good tidbits in there, and so kind of the lens I'm going into this with is this is my prediction of what the Baltimore Ravens are going to do, not necessarily what I think they should do. And I'll make some of those nuances as we go through because there are a few things that I think the Ravens are going to do, such as keep a fourth running back, that I personally wouldn't do. And I'll kind of go through all that as we get into it. So let's dive into it, go position by position, and let's start with the quarterback position. So this one, we can kind of go through this pretty quickly. Lamar Jackson and Cooper Rush are going to be making up the final 53-man roster with two quarterback spots. I think that's how they get to 25 and 25. I don't think they can carry three. And honestly, Devin Leary didn't look like an NFL quarterback to me. I do have him marked yellow, so I guess I should explain the color code. Green means on the roster. Yellow means recommended for the practice squad, and red would be just straight up cut. Now, I will put the nuance, obviously, that if a different quarterback becomes available, to be on the practice squad, I do think they'll look to replace Devin Leary. He really just didn't look the part this year. I was a little disappointed. I actually think he looked worse than last year, which is kind of surprising. But nonetheless, it is what it is. They took a shot on him. It just isn't going to work out. But number 8 will be your starting quarterback. Surprise, surprise. Cooper Rush will be the backup. Then we get into the running back room, where this is kind of where we get into the first what the Ravens are going to do versus what I would do. And, obviously we know the top dog is Derrick Henry. He will be the starter. We know Keaton Mitchell is going to be their change of pace back. They dressed him in warmups today and then didn't play him. That means he's a lock. And Justice Hill is obviously the third down back and also a change of pace back. So really what we get into is John Harbaugh a week ago said Rasheen Ali was going to be on this team. They'd go with 4th running backs, and he basically reaffirmed that today. I believe it was Jeff Strebick that asked. And so I got what the Ravens would do, marking that with 4 running backs making the team. This will come into play later when we get into the defensive room, because I have it set right now to go 25 on offense, 25 on defense. I personally would not keep a 4th running back. I have Gaskin marked for the practice squad over D'Ernest Johnson. I do think Johnson ran better, but Myles Gaskin has a little bit of that special teams upside because he can be a returner. That's really what my decision making was, but you could really flip the two of them. I think they'll keep one of the two, and it really kind of shows why I wouldn't keep a 4th running back. I think if we're in a position where Rasheen Ali is getting major snaps as the team's running back, we're in a pretty bad spot, and I don't really think the delta between a practice squad running back elevation like a Gaskin or a Johnson, that caliber of player, and Rasheen Ali is really going to make that big of a difference on the field. I think ideally, Derrick Henry plays 17 games, of course, but if Hill and Mitchell are covering for an injury, if you're kind of down one of those guys, then that's when Ali's playing in. So I just don't really see how the roster spot is justified. He's going to be inactive every week. I can't see them activating 4. He doesn't play a key special teams role. Keaton Mitchell's obviously a returner. Justice Hill can also do teams if he needs to, but he's kind of grown out of that. And then one guy I want to shout out is Scott. As he's been the backup fullback, he's played a ton because Ricard's been, obviously he's a lock, so he hasn't been playing, but I thought he's been really good. And so I'd love to see him kick around on practice squad. I'd love to see them try and develop him as an inline tight end the way they did with Ricard, see what they could get out of him. So just a big shout out to him because I think he earned it. Then you look at the tight end room, and this is where the Ravens are going to have to make a decision with Isaiah Likely, because it's going to impact that roster spot. And, we heard Jeff on the Ravens Collective last week kind of talk about this, and his point was basically that if you think you can get Isaiah Likely back at any point in the first 4 weeks, it's not worth putting him on injured reserve because he's such a critical player that we need to get him back. So I have him marked as green, making the final 53. I don't think he's going to be ready week 1, week 2, but I think he could be ready week 3 or week 4, and we need to get him back. I don't want to wait till week 5 if we don't have to. So I have them keeping 4 tight ends, 4 running backs, and this becomes a pretty tight roster crunch. Now, obviously, Patrick Ricard, I call him a tight end. He plays more tight end than he does fullback, but he's also obviously fullback. You can put him under running back and go 5-3. It really doesn't matter. But this cut at tight end, I think, is pretty straightforward. I think they're going to obviously keep those first four. The only thing that could change is if they do decide to IR Isaiah Likely. I don't think they'll add one of the other competitors at tight end. I think they'll roll with 3 and then potentially see a practice squad elevation. But I think they just roll with those 3 at that point. Then we get into the wide receiver room. Again, I don't want to waste a whole bunch of time on this. I think it's pretty cut and dry. You got your top 6 wide receivers. I think LeJonte Wester earned his returner spot as the punt returner. I think you got Tez Walker, who will probably be your game day inactive, though it was nice to see him pushing on special teams today. He made a nice play. I think that's awesome. But your top 4 are Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, DeAndre Hopkins, and Tylan Wallace. And we may see Tez Walker push for one of those spots, but with Tylan Wallace and LeJonte Wester being key special teamers, they're going to get the 4 or 5 spots on game day over Tez until Tez can carve out that special teams role when the top 3 are healthy. So I think pretty cut and dry here. I kept Keith Kirkwood, Dayton Wade, and Anthony Miller as recommended practice squad guys. Keith Kirkwood being a key special teamer. Anthony Miller being a guy that played in the playoffs last year, was kind of a special teamer and a slot guy. I think they value that. And I think this team likes Dayton Wade. I wonder if Wade will look to go elsewhere to get an opportunity. But it really became between Cunningham and Wade. And we're just not really seeing anything produce out of Cunningham. I like how they've been trying to develop something there, but I'm just not seeing it to justify that. So I went with Wade over Cunningham. I just think Wade's better. And then we get into the offensive line room. Honestly, the biggest surprise here, I wouldn't say necessarily a surprise, but the biggest story I think was Corey Bullock snatching that backup center role over Nick Samac. Came out as the first team with Tyler Linderbaum not playing center and held it down, and was one of those guys that just grabbed a job and ran away with it. So I have him making the team. And then it really became for me between, because Noteboom and Vincent are going to be your backups. They've already announced the starting offensive line when it's healthy. So it became who gets the 9th spot. Is it Ben Cleveland or is it Dellinger? And so I have gone with Ben Cleveland making the team because I think he has more versatility and he has experience that if he has to get into the guard picture, I think he can, step in and do it right away. Whereas with Dellinger, we just haven't gotten to see a ton of them. I think they like him. They drafted him. It's pretty rare that they don't keep their draft picks, but he hasn't really done anything crazy in preseason to, I think, you'd get snatched off practice squad. So I have them rolling with Dellinger and Samac on practice squad. Emory Jones will obviously be on IR. And then I have them cutting Penning, Dalcourt, and Holsky and keeping Gerard Lichahan as kind of the developmental tackle. He had pretty good preseason. I thought there was some interesting stuff there, but obviously the developmental tackle is Carson Vincent, and your game day swing tackle is going to be Noteboom. I would expect on game day that Carson Vincent will be inactive, and then they'll have Corey Bullock as the backup center, Ben Cleveland as the backup guard, and Joe Noteboom as the backup tackle. So I think this O-line room, I think, really cleared itself up over the last little bit, but I'll be interested to see what they do with Ben Cleveland and Corey Dellinger. I think that's going to be a really Carson Dellinger. I think that's going to be an interesting decision because they usually want to keep their draft picks, but Ben Cleveland has the experience and they value that, especially when it comes with versatility. And we've seen Cleveland play center in a pinch. We've seen him play right tackle, which he did last year. So I don't want to see him at right tackle, but he does have that versatility to his name. So that gives us an offense of 25 positions. I honestly think this offensive prediction is pretty cut and dry. It really comes down to whether or not they're going to keep Rasheen Ali. The last couple of years, I think they've gone 10 O-line. This year, I have them going 9. Your 10th O-line will be Emory Jones if he gets healthy. They'll have to make a decision at that point. But, I think this offensive prediction is pretty cut and dry. There's not really a whole lot to kind of suss out. It's really about whether or not they keep Rasheen Ali. On the defensive side of the ball, this is where competitions come into play. You have, especially at the one tech position, because they're not going to keep more than 2. But John Jenkins was brought in as a steady steady backup behind Travis Jones. But Jason Jones had some flashes. CJ Okoye had some flashes, though kind of faded after game 1. So I thought that became a really interesting battle. And then you have Anise Peebles, very promising young rookie. Brent Urban, kind of that guy that's just he's just steady, right? He's going to come in, he's going to play 10 to 12 snaps, but he's going to make a couple plays, and you kind of want him around. And then you got a guy like CJ Ravenel who made some plays, but kind of faded today. And I thought Okoye faded today as well. So I have them going with 5 defensive linemen. Jones, Jenkins getting that spot. Okoye can be a 17th practice squad player because he came in through the international player program. And then I have them also putting Brent Urban on the practice squad because I think they'll kind of be like, we'll go with 5, we'll elevate you the first couple weeks until we kind of see what's going on. So I do think they'll want to have 6 as an option, but I think Brent Urban, just with he's been able to play ball with them in terms of roster manipulation. He's been cut like the last 2 years, I think, and then ends up back on the roster at some point. So I think he's just kind of a team player in that perspective. He knows the team values him. They just have to do some roster gymnastics. So I can see them doing that again. And there's no way they're not going to keep Peebles. Brody's one of their kind of backups that they go to. So I have Urban, Okoye, Ravenel going onto the practice squad, Odeli and Jones being cut. It'll be interesting to see what they do between Jason Jones and CJ Okoye. I think Okoye gets that bump for practice squad over Jason Jones because he can be the 17th player through that program. Then we get into the outside linebacker room. This one kind of clarified itself with Adisa Isaac getting hurt. Ojabo played a lot in the 3rd preseason game. So, I kind of was wrestling in my head. Would they let Ojabo go? Will they try and trade him and carry 4 outside linebackers? Because there's not a whole ton of special teams upside in Ojabo. Tavius Robinson plays special teams. He's your glass eater, kind of your glue guy. So, it kind of lessens the need for that 5th outside linebacker. I do have them ultimately carrying 5. Adisa Isaac going to IR, Malik Ham getting cut, but I have Kamon Rucker, the butcher, making the practice squad. I think they want to see a little bit more from him. So that's kind of how I tease this out. So we're at 5 outside linebackers, 5 defensive linemen. Then we get into the linebacker discussion. And this is where I think folks are going to be upset. And this gets into a conversation of what I would do versus what I think the Ravens will do. This entire conversation is going to come down to special teams. I think they brought in Jake Hummel. They brought him in early in March, not early in March, but like pretty quick in March because they lost Christian Welch. They lost Chris Board. They lost Malik Harrison, 3 key special team linebackers. And then they went out and signed a linebacker, a special team linebacker ace. I think they're going to keep Jake Hummel. I think Jay Higgins outplayed him. I think he outplayed Teddy Buchanan. I think he's your 3rd best linebacker on the roster, but ultimately he goes to practice squad as a victim of the numbers. I haven't been able to, and we'll get into it here in a second with the cornerback room. I haven't been able to find a path to the roster where Jay Higgins makes it. And really where my mind is, because I keep saying, it's what the Ravens would do. I'm struggling with justifying it because they didn't give him an increased role. It's not like they played him beside Trent Simpson instead of Buchanan. They've played Buchanan over him. He's played the second half in all 3 preseason games. I think there's a disconnect between how the Ravens view him and how fans view him. Now, I've made it clear. I've been super impressed with this kid's film. He's checked every box. He's been physical. He's outplayed Teddy Buchanan on film. It's not even close. And I think it's a shame, but I do think he ultimately goes to practice squad. Whether or not he gets poached, we'll see. But that's what I think the Baltimore Ravens will do. When we get to the corner room and the safety room, a lot of injuries, a lot of red marks. Sucks to see, but it did kind of clarify the picture. And really it comes down to, do they keep 5 safeties and 6 corners? Do they keep 6 corners, 4 safeties that could have opened that linebacker spot? I ultimately have them keeping 7 corners. It's because they have 2 guys in Awuzie and Jar Alexander who have been injury prone. And I think they want that outside depth in TJ Tampa and Jalen Armour-Davis. But Keon Martin has absolutely earned a roster spot. This kid has been incredible. He wasn't even signed as a UDFA. He came in on a rookie tryout contract, impressed the coaches, and then he ran away with it on the practice squad. This kid deserves his flowers. What a performance from Keon Martin, kind of putting a pin in it today. I don't know how you keep him off the roster, so I have to go with 7 corners, and my justification being that I think they want that outside depth with TJ Tampa and Jalen Armour-Davis, given that both Jar Alexander and Awuzie have that injury history. Then we get into the safety room. Ruben Lowry came in, made a ton of plays in camp. We heard all the reports. He played well in the preseason games. I think he stole that spot over Beau Braid. I have Beau Braid going to the practice squad, and I'm a little disappointed in it. I like Beau Braid a lot. I think he's a better safety than Sanusi Kane, but Sanusi Kane's a better special teamer, and I think that kind of fourth safety, if they go into a 3 safety look, I actually think it's going to be Kyle Hamilton, going into the hunter killer drone mode with Malachi Starks and Ruben Lowry instead of Sanusi Kane being that kind of third safety. So Sanusi Kane's going to get in there for special teams. Beau Braid goes to practice squad, and that gives us a defense of 25 positions. So this is where it really becomes a discussion between, do you keep 7 corners? Who are you getting rid of? Do you get rid of TJ Tampa or Jalen Armour Davis? Because Jalen Armour Davis has that injury history. To keep a guy like Higgins, did Higgins outperform, one of these special teams guys? Did Jay Higgins' linebacker upside outweigh Jake Hummel's special teams upside? Those are kind of the roster decisions I think the Baltimore Ravens are going to have to make. But ultimately, this is where my prediction is landing based on kind of what I think the Ravens will do, some of their tendencies, especially some of their value in the special teams roles. So that's what I have for you guys. I can't wait to read your comments. I hope you guys absolutely fill up the comment section. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment. What'd you like? What didn't you like? What's your prediction? Drop it down below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this breakdown. Hit subscribe if you're new here. And as always, thank you to our friends at Jimmy's Seafood for sponsoring this video. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. Peace out, everyone.